Hello, everyone. Hello and welcome. We'll get started in a few minutes. Okay, welcome everyone to this virtual event in honor of Disability Intimacy by Alice Wong, Essays on Love, Care, and Desire. I'm so excited to celebrate this new anthology edited by Alice Wong. My name is Sarah Hollenbeck, and I'm the co-owner of Women and Children First, Chicago's feminist bookstore. Before I get started, I wanted to give a description of myself. I am a white woman with short, curly hair, brown hair. I am in front of a chalkboard here at the bookstore that says abortion is healthcare. I have a facial paralysis, which means that my mouth is always a little open and my eyes are always a little closed. I am so delighted to share this space with all of you tonight. Before I get started, I want to offer an access invitation. We invite you to make yourself comfortable in your space. Feel free to keep your camera on or off and take this program at your leisure. This event will also be recorded, and we'll make that recording available after the event for those who cannot join us tonight. Now I'm going to hand it over to Beth Benson from Access Living. Access Living is our co-sponsor for this event.
Hi everyone, Beth speaking. Yes, my name is Beth Benson and I'm from the Arts and Culture Project at Access Living. For accessibility tonight, we have provided cart captioning and American Sign Language interpretation. If you're using ASL, we'll keep the interpreters spotlighted throughout the event, and just make sure to have your view in gallery view in order to be able to see the interpreter.
Mhm.
So we will also be providing visual descriptions of ourselves throughout the program as needed. So I'll kick that off by giving a visual description of myself. I am a white non-binary person with shoulder length brown hair and pink rimmed glasses, and I'm sitting in front of a bright yellow wall. So I'll pass it back to Sarah for the land rights acknowledgement.
Yes, thank you, Beth. I want to offer a land acknowledgement that we are currently gathered together in virtual space. Women and Children First and Access Living are located on the ancestral homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, the Potawatomi, the Odawa, the Ojibwe nations, as well as other tribal nations. In the spirit of healing, we acknowledge the original peoples of the Chicagoland area, and we want to name that Chicago has one of the largest urban Native American communities in the United States. Native people are part of Chicago's past, present, and future. And as a community invested in social justice, we understand that fighting for disability justice requires dismantling settler colonialism, white supremacy, and ableism. I want to also offer an overview of tonight's program. In terms of the structure, following the introduction, Beth is going to give a short description of the arts and culture program at Access Living. Then I'll introduce our editor, Alice Wong, as well as our guest panelists. Alice and our panelists will then be in conversation. Now I'm going to hand it off to Beth for a little bit more information about Access Living.
Yeah, so Access Living is very proud to partner with Women and Children Bookstore to present a ongoing series of book events highlighting the work of disabled writers. And Access Living is a cross-disability organization focused on services and advocacy for people with disabilities, led by people with disabilities. Access Living's Art and Culture project promotes innovative art, supports new and established artists with disabilities, develops new audiences, and increases public access to disability art and culture. So I'm going to really quick take a moment to thank our other sponsors who make events like these possible. So this event is brought to you by Bodies of Work, a network of disability art and culture, and the Disability Culture Activism Lab, a teaching lab housed under the Department of Art Therapy and Counseling at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. This program receives generous funding from Healing Illinois, funded by the Illinois Department of Human Services in partnership with the Field Foundation. This program is also partially supported by a grant from the Illinois Arts Council Agency, Shirley Ryan Ability Lab, and the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research.
Beth, I'm sorry to stop you, but someone said that only Sarah's video is visible and can't see ASL interpreter. So shall we fix that?
Oh, can you
Yes.
see?
Appreciate the introduction. Let's figure that out.
Thank you. Can you see them now? Oh,
Yes, they can see now.
okay. All right. Thank you.
I think that was the end of my
Okay.
spiel. So I'll pass things back to Sarah now that we have our interpreter back in view.
Yes, it is my honor to introduce Alice Wong, the editor of Disability Intimacy. Alice Wong is a disabled activist, media maker, and research consultant based in San Francisco, California. She is the author of the best-selling memoir, Year of the Tiger, the founder and director of the Disability Visibility Project, an online community dedicated to creating, sharing, and amplifying disability media and culture, and the editor of the anthology Disability Visibility, First-Person Stories from the 21st Century, and Disability Visibility 17 First-Person Stories for Today, adapted for young adults. Alice is also the host and co-producer of the Disability Visibility podcast and co-partner in a number of collaborations, such as Crit the Vote and Access is Love. From 2013 to 2015, Alice served as a member of the National Council on Disability, an appointment by President Barack Obama. Our other panelists for the evening include Akemi Nishida. Akemi uses research, education, and activism to investigate how ableism and Satanism are exercised in relation to racism, cis heteropatriarchy, and other forms of social injustices. She also uses such methods to contribute to disability justice activism. She is the author of Just Care, Messy Entanglements of Disability, Dependency, and Desire, in which she examines public healthcare programs as well as grassroots interdependent care, collective and bed space activism. She teaches at the University of Illinois, Chicago, while also advocating for disability justice locally and nationally. Our next panelist is Ashley Volion. Ashley is a native of Louisiana and currently resides in New Orleans. Ashley has a PhD in disability studies from the University of Illinois at Chicago and a bachelor and a master's in sociology from the University of New Orleans. Ashley's research interests are disability and access intimacy, as well as home and community-based services. She also has poetry published in the Queer Disability Anthology. Currently, Ashley is employed as a policy analyst at Disability Rights LA and a lecturer in sociology at Tulane University. She is committed to ensuring that people with disabilities are fully integrated members of society. And finally, Moya Bailey is also joining us. Moya is a professor at Northwestern University and is the founder of the Digital Apothecary and co-founder of the Black Feminist Health Science Studies Collective. Her work focuses on marginalized groups' use of digital media to promote social justice. And she is interested in how race, gender, and sexuality are represented in media and medicine. She is the digital alchemist for the Octavia E. Butler Legacy Network and the board president of Allied Media Projects, a Detroit-based movement media organization that supports an ever-growing network of activists and organizers. She is a co-author of #Activism, Networks of Race, Gender, and Gender Justice, and is the author of Misogynoir Transformed, Black Women's Digital Resistance. I'm going to invite all of these amazing panelists to join us. First, I'll make Akemi the host to make herself visible. And then Akemi can add in Moya, and Moya can add in Ashley. And then if you can make me the host as well, and then I'll disappear.
Hello everyone, it's a delight to be here with you all online, and I am so thankful to partner with Women and Children First celebrating my new anthology, Disability Intimacy. I'd like to thank the ASL interpreters and captioners and everyone involved in organizing this event. My book just came out on April 30th, and I can't believe it's out in the world. I haven't moderated many conversations since I became a non-speaking person about 2 years ago, so please put up with my nervousness. I use a speech-to-text app to speak right now, and there are times when it may mispronounce words. It may also take me a minute or two to type responses. I'm an Asian American woman with a tracheostomy at my neck attached to a ventilator. I'm wearing a blue pinstripe shirt with white stripes. I'm also wearing a bold red lip color. While we are gathered here online, there is an active genocide happening in Gaza by the Israeli Defense Forces. Palestinians are experiencing mass starvation, suffering, and disablement, not to mention the thousands of people who have been murdered. We are in solidarity with the people of Palestine, who are fighting for their homeland and their right to exist. On that note, I'm honored to be in conversation with 3 of the contributors to Disability Intimacy, Ashley Volion, Akemi Nishida, and Moya Bailey. When I first envisioned my latest anthology a few years ago, I wanted it to push, expand, and subvert the meaning of intimacy from disabled perspectives. Most books and other forms of media often only cover intimacy as romantic love and sex. I think it's so much more, and while I am personally working on my understanding of intimacy, I'd like to ask all 3 of you what intimacy means to you. Why don't we start with Moya, Akemi, then Ashley, and please describe yourself before sharing.
Hello, everyone. My name is Moya Bailey, and I'm wearing a rainbow sweater, and I have a pink background. I have glasses. I'm a dark-skinned Black woman with a short natural. And I really appreciate this question about intimacy. When I think of intimacy, I think of sensual connection. And by sensual, I mean all of the senses. So whether it's feeling, touch, taste, smell, there are just so many ways that we can be intimate with people. Even time spent to me is its own form of intimacy. So when I think of intimacy, I'm thinking of the ways that we connect to each other in these spaces where our senses are meeting one another. And I'll pass it to Akemi.
Hi, everyone. This is Akemi Nishida speaking. I'm a femme presenting cis woman from Japan. I have a medium straight black hair. I have a black shirts, and I'm of course wearing a red lip color because it's Alice Wong's book event. How can I had to do that. So thank you so much for having this space to celebrate this beautiful, amazing book. So what intimacy means to me, like Moya described, I feel it's hard to describe with a word. It's just a kind of like a name or label we give to our bodily sensation or bodily experience or bodily reaction. Like if I have to describe it, the synonym would be like feeling of trust or feeling safe or feeling joy, but in so much more depth, like a deep trust, deeper safety, and a deep joy. That kind of feeling or sense of ease that coming from the deeper place in my body, like my gut, like feeling safe, that is safe enough that I can take off my armor, or my muscle is not tight, but it's more relaxed, and my body and heart feel lighter or warm and excited. So it's kind of feeling that changes how my body is built almost. I'll stop here and pass it to Ashley.
Hi, so I am a Filipino white woman. My hair is in a headband, and I have shoulder length reddish brown hair, and I'm wearing a black polka dotted dress. And my background is blurred out. So, what intimacy means to me? Intimacy is such a complex term to me, and it's always evolving every day as I think more and more about the term. But intimacy means that safety feeling and that trust feeling, but it also encompasses being able to be my whole self. The parts that I may hide from other people in the world, I don't hide them in intimate moments, and it's just having that space to be who I am authentically.
This is Alice. I appreciate what all of you said. Would any of you like to respond to one another's responses to what intimacy means? Feel free to jump in. This is your time.
I'll jump in. This is Moya. Sometimes when I think of intimacy, I think of it as the safety and trust that Akemi mentioned, but I also think of intimacy as potentially harmful when it's taken advantage of. And so intimacy can also mean people being close enough to hurt you. Close enough to hurt you and close enough to love you. That's just what I was thinking about when you're talking about safety and trust, Akemi.
This is Alice. Is there anything else the three of you would like to say?
I'm more excited to just jump in to talk about books. I'm happy to move to the next question unless Ashley or Moya has more to say.
No, I feel the same way.
Okay, now we're getting to the fun, meaty part. I would love for each of you to read a short excerpt to give the audience a taste of your brilliance. And after reading it, can you share why you selected it and anything else you would like to say about your essay? Akemi and Ashley are co-authors and will be reading excerpts from the same piece. How about we start with Moya, Ashley, and Akemi?
Okay, I'll be reading from my piece called Dreaming of Black Disability Doulas and Imagining. So I am disabled. It's taken me some time to get more comfortable with claiming this as an identity for myself, alongside Black, queer, woman, non-binary, Southern, etc., a host of other identities that I readily acknowledge. I know that part of my reluctance was the particularities of disability stigma. Not that these other identities don't have their own kinds of stigma attached to them too, but honestly, being presumed able-bodied added a layer of disclosure that generally required me to out myself in ways that my Blackness, queerness, and gender, being generally already legible, did not. My lack of exposure to disability culture and disability intimacy played a role in my hesitancy with claiming disability identity as well. Having grown up in a Black family with a Black mother and father and access to Black queer community in the Black gay Mecca of the United States, Atlanta, Georgia, by virtue of attending Spelman College, a historically Black and historically women's college, I found many places where my other identities were actually part of why I was in those spaces. I had connections to communities that affirmed these stigmatized aspects of myself and access to institutions and organizations of support. Part of what helped me get to a full-throated declaration was reading the work of other disabled people of color and being close friends with disabled people of color with whom I built intimacy. Disabled friends have been such important teachers for me of what disabled life can be. However, my disabilities were so different from the ones that the people closest to me experienced. It took more time for me to be comfortable saying, me too, given those differences. And I'll leave the imagining for you to read. It's a conversation with me and an imagined Black disability doula. And that conversation is really born out of what I wish I had had as I was coming to identify as disabled. And to be honest, disability visibility was one of those texts that also helped me get closer to really coming to terms with my own disabled identity. Just seeing the breadth and way that people understood their relationship to disability was really important. So I want to thank you, Alice, for inviting me and kind of pushing me, knowingly or not, into this space of being able to claim this part of myself. So thank you. And I'm going to pass it to Akemi and Ashley.
Ready, Ashley?
Yes.
So Ashley and my chapter is conversation between us. So it's written like a conversation. So we're gonna read introduction and some part of the conversation and then close with conclusion. So I'll go first. Igniting our power by reclaiming intimacy. Intimacy is such an intriguing word, but what is intimacy actually? And how about disability intimacy? As members of disability communities, how do we experience intimacy differently from those who are not part of these communities? These are questions that brought us, disability community friends and scholars, together to chat. And our conversations became this chapter. As two disabled women of color who are each coming from queer, migrant, and other communities, we became friends partially because of our common scholarly and personal interest about intimacy, care, and above all, community building. It is through the lens of our everyday lives that we understand the importance of discussions around intimacy that often go underrepresented. One thing we realized immediately is that intimacy is tricky to define because of its complexity and ever-evolving nature. But this is what makes intimacy so interesting, intimidating, frustrating, and fun to talk about. Growing up, we had a vague and narrow idea of what intimacy is. Our conversation says F that. Intimacy is anything but narrow. Within our conversation, we invoke our power through our articulation of intimacy by describing how these moments positively validate the very nature of our existence. However, we could not fully explain what intimacy is without discussing what we refuse to call intimacy. This conversation will not leave you with one concrete definition, but hopefully you will want to dive deeper into how we can define intimacy as people with disabilities. And I skip a few pages where I ask the question, what are the unique kinds of intimacy we are able to develop because we are disabled?
And this is my response. Intimacy and the way we create and develop intimacy is an important aspect of our disability community, of our disability identity. It teaches us different ways to look at what intimacy is and what it is not. Early on in my development as a disabled person, I would have described intimacy and the strict guidelines that I've seen on TV, purely physical. I think the uniqueness provides us ways to look at intimacy and not just a physical aspect. It allows us to look at it in different ways of emotion or access. That's why my scholarly work has primarily focused on access intimacy, a term put forward by Mia Mingus to describe intimate feelings disabled people experience when their access needs are not organic or met organically, because we don't have words sometimes for the different types of intimacy that we experience. I think this gets us to expand our thinking and our knowledge base as we develop our self-identity. Our thinking about intimacy grows too, and we're able to be more intimate with people. I keep thinking about how you said previously that within a lot of these intimate moments between disabled people, we get to feel like our whole selves are being valued. I spent so many years being like, I can't be intimate in this way, and being really depressed about it, and being like, I won't get that fairy tale that I see on TV. To be honest, that feeling has not 100% gone away. And I want to acknowledge that, because when we talk about disability identity and pride, we often give off the idea that we're these totally enlightened human beings and we don't have internalized ableism anymore. It gets lessened, and I think always have a little bit of internalized ableism instilled in us from society.
I love how you talk about intimacy prompts us to grow or is a necessary element for our growth. Intimacy is about affirming our value and existence, allowing ourselves to love and to be loved, and to take up this space together and to make us feel not alone. If we reclaim intimacy in such ways, not only human friendship, but also food, arts, and relationship with animals and nature sounds like a very intimate parts of our lives. We experience intimacy in so many ways.
We understand disability intimacy as there are ways to broaden how we view or define intimacy. We envision a world that acknowledges and validates and embraces our unique forms of intimacy, Crip wisdom, and essentially our existence, allowing disabled people to form deeper connections with others. In the world we envision, there are no longer obstacles to experiencing intimacy, and our intimate experiences are not surveyed and punished. To envision and advocate for disability intimacy, then we must embrace a world where people will no longer experience eugenics or life in incarceration. Through intimacy and Crip wisdom, we envision a world where disabled lives are not only accepted, but uplifted and centralized for the beauty that we all bring to the world. We want a world where we can experience different forms of intimacy freely. And I just want to say that I chose these pieces because oftentimes within our conversations, we grew in our understanding of intimacy and of each other. So this section that we picked together just shows you a little piece of those conversations when we might have found it really difficult to express and even articulate what intimacy was to us.
And I pick those intro and a conclusion because I really love every part of the conversation I had with Ashley, and I couldn't pick it, and I wish y'all will read all of it, just like Moya didn't really share what her imaginary doula would say. So I shared the intro and conclusion to kind of make you want to read the whole thing.
This is Alice. For the audience, I hope you were excited to read all of these essays after hearing these excerpts. I'd like to ask each of you some questions about your essays, starting with Moya first. We are friends and I know you from a lot of your scholarly work, most notably on #activism and on misogynoir, a term you coined. When I first reached out asking if you'd like to contribute a piece for disability intimacy, I was nervous and unsure if this is something you'd be interested in since it's a personal essay unlike academic writing. In your piece, you write how you initially thought many years ago that disability identity was for white people. I know this is definitely true for some Asian American disabled people. One thing that helped me was connecting to other Asian American disabled people who I became friends with and showed me there are multitude ways of being and identifying outside of the white disabled rights-based model. Where are you now and how you identify, and are you at a place where you feel comfortable with all of who you are? And if so, How did you get there?
Great question, Alice. Yes, I feel so much more comfortable saying that, yes, I'm disabled. And part of that had to do with having models. And I really love Laverne Cox's possibility models instead of role models. So people who provide for you a possibility of expression in terms of how they move through the world. And so I've seen so many more Black disabled possibility models that expanded my sense of what my life could be, what that means. And I also still am ambivalent about disability as an identity, even as I claim it, because there's something to me too about, and this is maybe the more academic side of me, that's always thinking about what does identity do for us and what does it perhaps limit, or how does identity, keep us locked into a certain time of framework, a certain way of understanding rights and how we relate to each other. And I do think there's something really valuable in the fact that communities of color have not necessarily embraced identity all the way, all the time. I don't think it's always internalized ableism that makes us reluctant. So I just hold that open, hold that intention. Why not both? Both both a little bit of internalized ableism and also perhaps another possibility model of how we might move together. So yeah, I really appreciate that question, Alice.
This is Alice. Moya, I love that you wrote about doulaship, which is so different from mentoring, and perhaps it's more about possibilities like you just mentioned from Laverne Cox. Can you speak more about doulaship and how it's as a form of intimacy that is grounded in disability justice? Who are the doulas in your life that you want to acknowledge if you are willing?
Yes. So one of the doulas that I want to acknowledge is the late, great Stacey Park Milburn, who I mentioned also in the piece. Stacey's one of the first people that I heard use this term, a disability doula, and started me thinking about what does it mean to have somebody who can help you through this particular transition. And I talk about disability identity and coming into disability intimacy as its own transformational life moment. When we think about doulas in terms of birth and death, having to think about doulas also in terms of disability really expands what we mean when we think of someone helping and ushering you into a space. And this connects to a question that I'm going to ask you later, which is, how do we think about the different times and ways that people come into disability? It's not always at the same time for everybody.
This is Alice. Thank you for sharing, Moya. I remember interviewing Stacey Park Milburn for my podcast many years ago when she talked about doulaship. The next question is for both Akemi and Ashley. For your piece, you two are in conversation with each other, which is such a lovely way for two disabled women of color to really get into it about what crip intimacy is and what it looks like. Can you two share your process of collaborating and editing this piece together? And was that in itself an intimate relationship in exchanging ideas and being vulnerable with each other? I'll start with Akemi first and then Ashley.
Yes, thank you so much for that question. So this is Akemi speaking. So when Alice invited me to contribute to this book, I immediately thought about co-authoring it with someone I trust and someone I can open up with each other and towards each other. So I said that intimacy to me is something we feel deep in our body, mind, but also intimacy is something that's floating among us, kind of like the vibe we feel, or this like invisible web that brings us together and stick us together, whether we like it or not. So I wanted to capture what is between me and Ashri as intimacy. Hence the chapter is a conversation between us. But also I want to say it's more than just a conversation. The chapter is also the records of us being vulnerable with each other, sharing our vulnerability, the deep feeling we feel as a kind of like a bodily knowledge, and much more. And then there are not many people I feel comfortable enough to be vulnerable with, and I'm super grateful that Ashri agreed to co-author this chapter with me, and she's actually the first leading author of the chapter. And Ashri, if you know Ashri personally, you know that she is so excellent, talented, great at the witnessing and holding space for you or for me to really share my experience, even though our experience is not always same or overlapping. So I'm very thankful for Ashri to opening, her experience with me and holding this space together to be vulnerable and disagree and agree and enjoyed every moment of writing this piece together.
So for me, I was so ecstatic when Akemi invited me to be a co-author with her on this piece. Because Akemi and I have been friends and collaborators for years, since I was a young scholar to now. So I feel like a lot of my growth, both scholarly and as a disabled woman, has come out of conversations with Akemi and I. And I really loved writing this piece because we set aside time every week to just talk and open up. And it was so cathartic for me because we talked about things that I didn't think about since I was a child. So it was very therapeutic and things that I don't think about. And it allowed me the space to get to know my friends better, because I feel like I have a new appreciation for Akemi, even more than I did before. And that was a lot. And so just having that space to grow with one another and to just be there for one another and to get more of our thoughts out there on the intimacy and how it grows and what we have left to do with it, because there's still so much more.
This is Alice. Thank you both for sharing. I have a question for Akemi. So much of intimacy, much like all social conventions, is rooted in heteronormativity, white supremacy, capitalism and ableism. What will it take to center disabled wisdom in all things? And what do you imagine the world would look like if that happened?
Yes. So what it takes to center disabled wisdom to rethink intimacy. I said this book and your work. I mean, in this heteronormative, white supremacist, capitalist, ableist, xenophobic, and fatphobic, and the society, I rarely see the term disability and intimacy put together. Or when it does, it's just provoking that gross disability stereotype, like ableist stereotypes. So your brilliance and insistence that there is disability intimacy, such things exist, is already challenging the world, opening up the world, creating, transforming and creating the world where we can say like, oh yeah, disability intimacy, and talk about that. And I'm thinking about like decades ago, like I couldn't even imagine in the wildest dream to think about disability intimacy, because like decades ago, I feel like all we can talk, especially in the public space, is disability rights and how we need a legal rights for us to be together. So, how you're putting the word disability and the intimacy itself is a world making and a world changing, and also shows me how far we came, even though we have a long way to go. But I think this is a big way to challenge and break through this heteronormative white supremacist way to think about intimacy. And certainly, I dream of a world where disabled people's unique and brilliant wisdom is recognized and valued, like you do in your work with Disability Visibility Project. And by disability, like crip wisdom and brilliance, I'm including those who became disabled due to the capitalism, white supremacy, hetero or transphobic settler colonial violence. Like, as part of disability community, we have to do everything to protest and stop such violence that disabled people. At the same time, we need to simultaneously honor the complexity and the rich lives that disabled people carries on, no matter, however we become disabled. And I appreciate how your work kind of allowed space for such complex reality of disabled people and disability communities, and giving opportunity to the world to think there is such a thing as disability intimacy. So yeah, you are the answer to your question.
This is Alice. Thank you, Akemi. I hope this book is a start and will be part of many more offerings by disabled people on intimacy. My next question is for Ashley. Conversations are powerful, much like the one in the essay and the one we are having now. One reason why I am a storyteller and a lover of interviewing is the magic that organically happens when disabled people come together. I think part of the power is acknowledging how these conversations are conjurings, and yes, I said conjurings as if we are a bunch of disabled witches, which is true for me, ha ha ha, are so rare since systemic oppression designed us to isolate us. Who are the people in your life right now that give you that sense of wonderment, intimacy, and powerful magic? What do you love about being with them?
So, like you, Alice, I love storytelling and interviewing as well, because I think that's how we get to know one another, really. And the people in my life that give me those feelings, there are quite a few, and one being Akemi, but I go to a gym meant for people with disabilities called Split Second Fitness. And I gained a community of both men and women that has given me so much love and so much joy. And I learned so much from the conversations that happen organically every time I go. Recently for my birthday, I got those women together to go to birthday brunch, and I learned so much from them every day, and it just warms my heart because I came into my disability identity wanting to really figure it out scholarly, and that's how I came into what I studied academically. And from that understanding, I was able to find a little bit more of who I was. And it was because of that that I was able to find these women in my own community and make connections locally, but nationally as well.
This is Alice. Thank you for your question, Ashley. Okay, now I'd like to turn the tables. I'd like Akemi, Ashley, and Moya to ask any questions they may have for me. I will try my best to answer them, haha. Let's start with Ashley, Moya, and then Akemi. Let's start with you, Ashley.
So, Alice, you're amazing. And you do so much work in the community. But as a disabled woman myself, I know sometimes with having to take care of myself physically, mentally, and do all the work that I do, it can be totally draining. So, do you have any self-care tips that you can provide us on how you're able to produce so much work and be able to get your self-care needs met?
This is Alice. This question is quite prescient, Ashley. It is incredibly hard just to care for your disabled body on top of the roles and responsibilities you may have in life. Sometimes I feel like I am furiously treading water, just barely keeping up with things like the launch of this book and all the promotional activities related to it. I try to stay organized with lots of reminders in my calendar and a to-do list on my notes app that keeps growing. The most important thing that helps me is to remind myself that I live in crypt time, that everything else will have to pause or fall by the wayside because disabled bodies are precarious and unruly. And when that happens, it's super important not to feel guilty about it, and that part one I'm still struggling with. This past weekend I was in the ER. I had to sleep on a gurney overnight while they still ran tests for a potential blood clot in my legs. While I was worried the entire time, I also thought about how I needed to prepare for an event scheduled for this past Tuesday and complete interview questions for a publication. Even if I got home Sunday afternoon, I knew I would be exhausted since I only got 4 hours of sleep. So I reluctantly emailed my publicist telling her I need to reschedule my book event and that I will turn in the responses for the interview later. Since I have to use this app to speak, it can take me a few hours to write what you are hearing now. I felt so horrible about doing this, but I was also relieved because it's been a lot for me getting ready for my book launch. The contributors that I was going to be in conversation with understood and told me not to apologize, something I think mostly happens with disabled people because we get it. I really needed a few days to rest and slowly work on all my stuff. On Monday I slept in and worked on the answers for this event and took a 4-hour nap that felt so good. I try to spread out my various deadlines, but sometimes it's just not possible. So Ashley, I guess the tip that is helpful for me and may be helpful for others is to work through your internalized ableism, that is, the pressure to produce and the pressure of not disappointing others and yourself. As disabled people, we live in crypt time, and we can expand access and flexibility in everything we do. The essay 6 Ways of Looking at Crypt Time by Dr. Ellen Samuels resonated deeply with me, especially now from the vantage point as a non-speaking person. Quote, "For crypt time is broken time. It requires us to break in our bodies and minds to new rhythms, new patterns of thinking and feeling and moving through the world. It forces us to take breaks, even when we don't want to. Even when we want to keep going, to move ahead. It insists that we listen to our body minds so closely, so attentively, in a culture that tells us to divide the two and push the body away from us while also pushing it beyond its limits. Crypt time means listening to the broken languages of our bodies, translating them, honoring their words." End quote. To me, gripping something is to bend, compress, twist, subvert, and embed disabled wisdom into systems, institutions, and cultures. I try to do that every day, but it's not easy. I hope that answers your question, Ashley. Moya, do you have a question for me?
I do. My question for you is, what book do you feel like is next in these series?
This is Alice. I have a few documents in my computer with book ideas and projects I want to work on. I have so many books I want to write or edit, Moya. Imagine I said that with the emotion that comes with a million exclamation marks. Ha ha ha. There are 2 anthologies I have in mind right now, and I actually submitted a book proposal for one of them that was accepted. The announcement should come out in the next few months, so check out my website for it. I will keep the title and topic of the book secret for now, ha ha ha. But seriously, the last few years have been really rough on my health, and when I turned 50 in March, I reflected on what I've done and what I want to do. I don't dwell too much on my past work and prefer to keep challenging myself and growing. Not to be a downer, but I think about death a lot. It's a constant in my life, a dance partner that takes me on a few too many dips and twirls for my liking. Death is an intimate partner of mine, and it makes me appreciate life. I make the most out of every day, celebrating, loving, and caring for my friends, family, and 2 cats, Bert and Ernie. Even though I am in a race against time, I am having as much fun as I can every single day and working hard to make all of my dreams come true, including my book dreams and ambitions in publishing, such as becoming the editor-in-chief of my own imprint dedicated to disabled writers. Thank you for this question, Moya. Do you have another one for me?
You know I do. So my next question is really about people who are disabled later in life, and just some thoughts about, how they show up in disability organizing. Any thoughts or tips to offer?
This is Alice. Thank you for this question. I've been thinking a lot about how to get later in life disabled folks and folks newly disabled in disability organizing, but first it starts with politicization, in my opinion. And I've been thinking specifically of people with long COVID. There are an estimated 18 million people in the United States with long COVID, and this number will increase as the pandemic continues. And you heard that right, people. Newsflash, the pandemic is not over. This is a new group of disabled folks, including kids who have had multiple infections and grown up entirely during the pandemic, that the disability community needs to welcome. In some of the conversations I've had with folks with long COVID, I learned a lot about the intra-community tensions and conflicts. There are a lot of folks who will never identify as disabled or want treatments and be cured, which sort of goes against some of the expectations within the disability rights movement, where there is this sense that you have to use the right words, identify the right way, be proud of your disabled identity, and reject cures because it's based in the medical model that their bodies need to be fixed. Well, there are lots of disabled and chronically ill people who suffer and want alleviation of their symptoms, such as chronic pain, and that's important to acknowledge. Right now, there are 0 treatments for long COVID, and the organizing by folks with long COVID to get the federal government to fund research on it has been amazing to see. Senator Sanders recently proposed draft legislation that would provide $10 billion of research funding over 10 years, and that wouldn't have happened without pressure by people with long COVID. And I think there has always been a divide of sorts between patient advocacy, that is, advocacy focused on a disability or illness, and broader disability-related advocacy on all aspects of life. Both are political and both have strategies and movements that are unique and could benefit each other. And of course, the disability community is not a monolith, and I would guess the majority of disabled folks aren't politicized or interested in advocacy. And that's also a topic for another conversation. I think about some of the principles of disability justice outlined by Patty Byrne of Sins Invalid, and one of them is cross-disability solidarity, which is one starting point. That is, we need to understand our liberation is interconnected and we can build power together rather than competing against each other and fighting for the crumbs. Folks who have been disabled for a long time or who are experienced in organizing should meet people where they are and be more expansive in their thinking of how people identify and how they want to engage with organizing. There are so many newly sick or disabled people who don't know where to start and want to become more involved but are scared of being shut out or yelled at because they want to be cured or they say something that is obliged but don't realize it. That's where Dole has come that she writes so eloquently about Moya. New folks can show up in organizing more readily when folks with experience give everyone the space and grace to just be themselves, knowing everyone grows at their own pace and that there isn't a linear path to becoming an activist. Community organizing should be a nebulous, ever-evolving space for people to participate in creative new ways that work for them. I just pontificated a bit, and I'm not sure I answered your question, Moya. I think the short answer is current models and disability organizing need to evolve and partner with later in life disabled folks and newly disabled folks if they are really going to really embrace them. Thank you for your question. How about you, Akemi?
Yes, thank you for all the brilliant answers, Alice. This is Akemi speaking. So you write in a recent piece of Time magazine, and also you wrote this in the intro of this book too. I double checked that Alice wrote how, quote, death is an intimate partner of mine, end quote. I feel such an intimacy follows us as we are part of disability communities. Chicago disability communities has just lost amazing friends recently, both of whom are amazing activists and disabled women of color, Esther and Artessa. So you write a bit about grieving in your another brilliant book, Year of the Tiger. But can you tell us more about if you have any ritual or practice you engage in as you grieve, or how can a community grieve together?
This is Alice. Thanks for asking me this question, Akemi. Disabled people are always in the process of grieving, whether it's grieving over the violence of the obliged world that wants to erase and murder us, such assisted suicide laws, and how the state continues to abandon high-risk people during the pandemic, grieving over the state of your body, mind, and the changes that may come with it, grieving over the loss of your beloved comrades. As I mentioned earlier in my response to Moya's question, I think about death all the time, and there are so many of us in the disability community who died too early because of medical ableism, poverty, and structural oppression. And it enrages me thinking of all the disabled people who should be with us today. My disabled friends and I text in group chats about how many of us won't ever reach retirement. That it's a privilege to think one works until a certain age and gets to retire with a nest egg. Speaking from my own perspective, there are so many of us who had to fight and go through so much to find community, to find our people, that the loss cuts us deeply. And that's an intimacy that keeps us close, that ties us together. When my friend Stacy Park Milburn died several years ago, I was shocked, and then I was enraged when people who barely knew her started posting shit on Facebook about how much they'll miss her and that organizations need to do something to honor her when those who really knew her should be the ones centered in those affairs, and how they need time to grieve in private before having to respond to all kinds of nonsense aimed at the people who centered themselves instead of Stacy. I published the syllabus of Stacy's work with my friend Leah Lakshmi Peepsna Samarasinha the day after her death as a way to tell some people to shut the fuck up and just share her work, especially people who praised her in death but never supported her work or wouldn't even agree with her politics while she was alive. And that's one function of the Disability Visibility Project. It's to preserve and disseminate our stories in our own words. Storytelling is my ritual in dealing with grief. It is remembering our loved ones fiercely and also about celebrating the people we care about now, giving them their flowers and letting them know how many people treasure and appreciate them. All of us have disabled ancestors that we will never know, that history erased. When we share stories of our friends, we are keeping their wisdom and spirits alive. This July is the 10th anniversary of the Disability Visibility Project, which started off as an oral history project that ended up with over 100 oral histories archived at the Library of Congress, and it has grown into a podcast, guest essays on the website, and anthologies such as my first one, Disability Visibility, and this one. To answer your question, Akemi, communities can grieve together by creating something together, whether it's an online altar, writing a letter or postcard, recording of a memorial on Zoom, or even tweets and social media posts. We can grieve and celebrate the people we love by leaving something behind that will last forever. There is no one way to grieve, but creating helps me deal with the pain. And even if nothing exists or remains, we will know we were here. I know that sounds morbid, but I think it's really good to talk about these things, and that disability communities don't talk about grief and aging enough. This is why I wrote my own eulogy in my memoir, so that I get to dictate how I want to be remembered and celebrated. Haha. Here's a short excerpt. Quote, "Good shit takes time," Alice wrote in her first memoir, Year of the Tiger. She took her time with both her work and the pleasures of life, as someone who did not find success until her late 40s. Known for throwing excellent parties, curating disability media and culture exceptionally well, savoring a good latte and pastry, being a benevolent bossy boss to close friends and comrades, and messing around at all hours of the night, Alice is survived by her sisters, Emily and Grace. She is also survived by her holocats Blueberry, Claude, Cinnamon, Miomi Jr., Mittens, and Phil. Instead of flowers, donations can be made to your local animal shelter, food bank, library, or mutual aid collective. For the latest information on the multidimensional interstellar memorial organized by the Cabal, a pre-selected group of Alice's friends and family, go to the Disability Visibility Org. It will be a week-long online and in-person dance party, film festival, feast, orgy, and celebration. Please contact the Cabal for permissions, requests, or questions, as members know her wishes best and want to prevent any inaccurate coverage of Alice's life and work. Enjoy all of Alice's good shit, and may you create some good shit as well. End quote. Thank you for this question, Akemi. Since we are now close to the end of the event, I'd like to read a short excerpt of Disability Intimacy, and I'd like to invite the three of you to respond to it if you have anything to share, starting with Akemi, Moya, then Ashley. Quote, when I started working on this book, I Googled disability intimacy and the search results were disappointing and pathetic. EWWWWWW, I muttered to myself. Under the people also ask section, questions such as can people with disabilities find love? Are what I considered basic as fuck. Articles on stereotypes, stigmas, sexuality, asexuality, sexual abuse, and sexual dysfunction abounded. Stories about and by disabled people and what it's like to date, have sex, or be in a relationship abounded. Intimacy is more than sex or romantic love. Intimacy is an ever-expanding universe composed of a myriad of heavenly bodies. Intimacy is about relationships within a person's self, with others, with communities, with nature, and beyond. Disability intimacy will blow your mind, leaving you shook and open to the possibilities around us. Each piece in this anthology is unique, but one theme that runs throughout is tenderness, an expression of all the labor and care the contributors put into their stories. I delicately gathered and edited this book with sensitivity, knowing how many people put their trust in me. Being thoughtful, intentional, and generous are acts of intimacy we can give to one another. Intimacy comes in many forms, and you are deserving of it, whatever it looks like or means to you. Reading the words on this page creates a dialogue, an intimate act bringing us together across space and time. May disability intimacy set your spirit on fire and send you on a voyage of self-discovery, destination unknown. My journey continues, and I thank you for being part of it. I am but one small shiitake mushroom connected to a vast mycelial network with other disabled fungi, loving and caring for one another. We are not alone. End quote. How about we start with you, Moya, if you have anything to share?
I was gonna say, Alice, I love the mycelium moment at the end. I just said to a friend, given all of the terribleness of the world, if I got to pick how I come back, being a mushroom sounds pretty cool. Being tapped into that network of community, the intimacy of that sounds pretty exciting. And I love and feel the tenderness and the care that you put into the work. And I feel so fortunate to be a part of it because of that. And it has me wondering how we create and connect more people to that feeling. I used to think that the internet had, a place of possibility, but it's so different now than it was even, 2 years ago. Things have changed so much, but I'm grateful for the little spaces that we create. And I think your book in the, even the space that we have now is representative of that. So thank you.
This is Alice. Thank you, Moya. I love mushrooms too, and we have a lot to learn from the natural world. And you, Ashley? What are your thoughts on this excerpt?
So first of all, I want to say how honored I am to be a part of this anthology with so many beautiful people in my community. And so your intro made me think about that and the connectiveness and tenderness that we have. Um, I didn't help but have it resonate to me when you talked at the beginning about how you Googled intimacy and disability and how little amounts of things were out there or how they were entrenched in just this ableism. And I remember feeling the same way when I started my dissertation on access intimacy, having that gap and that just pure lack of not sensitivity but lack of feeling and emotion when these authors talked about anything having to do with any type of intimacy when it comes to disability. So I am so grateful that you even put us in conversation with one another because each piece, and I have yet to read the book in its entirety, which I'm excited to do, and I'll probably read over and over and over again. But it's your cohesive glue that put all this together for us to be in community with one another, and hopefully we can make that spread wider and wider. And that's what I love about the disability community now, is that I think it's growing to include more and more people of color and more diverse peoples in general. So I am so grateful, and I believe you're such a big catalyst of that.
This is Alice. Thank you, Ashley. The contributors blow me away, and it's 40 amazing disabled people assembled together in one book. It was like herding a bunch of magnificent cats as the editor. I have such joy editing everyone's work. And how about you, Akemi? What resonated with you?
Oh, everything. This is Akemi speaking, and I love your description of shiitake. Reminds me of my childhood at grandma's house, planting this shiitake, not seed, but things to this like half rotten wood rocks to grow shiitake. And I was like, if you're shiitake mushroom, I want to be shimeji mushroom with you on the same log. So I love that. But really thank you for inviting us to contribute to your good shit, as you say it. If anybody else asked me to, think about intimacy, I would respond immediately. I don't have the time, energy, I'm too exhausted, I'm too disabled to think about intimacy. Like, I don't need an intimacy, I need food to eat and time to sleep. Like, intimacy is the last things on my list. But it was you who invited me. And it was a great gift to sit down every week with Ashley, to secure the time and the space just to be in conversation with Ashley, just chill together, spend the time together. And most of the time we aren't even typing, like we aren't even being productive. We are just chatting about everything's come to our mind or happening on that day. And sometimes we just sat quietly to write together. So that setup, your invitation gave me the moments and the time to really breathe and sit down with Ashley to think, explore, experience intimacy together, even though it's frustrating and scary and intimidating. And now I'm reading this book I have in my hand. I'm reading each chapter, and each chapter it's quite short and feel manageable. So reading this book again gave me a moment to sit down and really to take a break and read and feel the tenderness, hardness, care, and the love and the intimacy with this book and all sorts of other chapters. So yes, good shit takes time, and thank you for inviting us to be part of your good shit.
This is Alice. The shiitake mushrooms are my favorite, and I look forward to being reincarnated and joining you on the same log and doing absolutely nothing, Akemi. Thank you, Moya, Ashley, and Akemi for being here online with me in conversation, which I believe is a form of intimacy across time and space with the audience. I've said this in previous events, but I believe all of us are now sharing a very special disabled space where we can just be together. Thank you again for contributing to my anthology and for your tender stories. On that note, I will kick it back to Sarah and Beth for a few last words.
Thank you all so much. That was such a wonderful, warm, and intimate conversation. We want to thank Alice, the catalyst, the invitation, the cohesive glue for all this good shit. We want to thank Akemi Nishida, Ashley Volion, Moya Bailey for joining us this evening. Also, thank you to Adam and Kristen for providing ASL. And thank you so much to Christina and Leah for providing captioning. Thank you to Access Living for co-sponsoring this event. And thank you again, all of you, for creating this revolution in the book. Thank you for your politics. Thank you for your love and care. We are all better for having this book in the world. If you don't already have the book, it's available to order. We recommend ordering from womenandchildrenfirst.com. I put a link in the chat to order. Thank you so much. For those who didn't join us tonight, don't worry, we recorded it and it will be on our YouTube channel in just 24 hours. We'll send that link via Eventbrite and you can share it widely. Thank you. Have a beautiful night.